We're not even in that. That's not even this season, Bob.
No, you just like slapped out a tuned in and didn't even blink an eye.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Dave. Thanks for joining Bob and I for our podcast, Thriving in Dystopia. And even though we always try and be professionals, sometimes we swear. So just know that going in. Bob. Hey, Bob.
Hi, Dave.
Well, here we are yet again in the sound studio, season 5, TID, DNB, P&M. You ready for it?
Yeah. What's P&M?
Peach and Maze.
Excellent.
You got any acronyms for us this week?
I.W.W.
Oh, yes. That's on your mind. I got that text. Do you want to tell the viewers what's been going on?
Yeah.
The viewership.
The abstract viewership. Yeah, well, I got really inspired. The first percolations were coming from the show when Dan came to the show and we were talking about the I.W.W. And then I'm reading a history book about the labor history in California, and the amount of sort of awful conditions of labor in California for the last 150 years, at least. And the I.W.W. was a big force from about 1900 to like 1930. And they led a massive strike. There was an international strike, but it was centered in Los Angeles. It was a maritime strike, and they were winning that strike. They were fighting the police, and it was actually both maritime and agriculture. So they were trying to beat the big shipping corporations and big agriculture in California. And the thing, because the establishment couldn't win, they brought in vigilantes. And this was during the rise of the Ku Klux Klan in the western states. And the Klan would come in and burn meeting halls or headquarters or even attack people in their homes. And that sort of subsided the strike, although they, of course, they won some demands. But so I looked up the I.W.W. and they're still actually, after going into underground for a long time, they're back and they're leading strikes across the country. They're not huge, but they're effective when they do manage to strike with local people. So I decided to join the I.W.W. and I'm a Wobbly, Dave.
Perfect, Bob. You did it. You, Tom Morello, Howard Zinn. Any other ones out there? There's red card holders.
There's many of them out there. But I will just mention that Emma Goldman, we don't think was, but she really liked the I.W.W. I wonder why she never joined.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe she just didn't like to join stuff. She's an unjoiner.
She's not a joiner. That's a good point. Yeah.
That's cool. And tell me a little bit more about starting your own chapter.
You can, you pay dues once you join, and the dues are whatever you can afford. And you can get resources like other people who are in your area, or, how to strike and how to think about labor power. I.W.W. has resources there. And then if you get some more action going on, then I think there's a possibility of folks from outside the area can come in and help support making a strike happen. And I'm not actually in it for that, because I'm actually in my own union where I work, and I'm actually just like a member, not a like super active person, but I just love the I.W.W. and everything about this union, from its like non-hierarchical, from it like being very multiracial from the beginning and anarchist, and the songbooks. I just love all of that. So that's why I joined.
Sweet. Yeah. I want to join as well. I don't know if I'm going to get to it for about a year, but I think once a little more funds get freed up. I looked into it a little bit too.
Cool.
Yeah. And it seems like a good organization to support at the very least, you know?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Dave. So that's one thing I've been up to, and maybe we should talk about the like weathering the political crisis of the last week. I don't know if you're feeling like you want to talk about that. It's, it's old news at this point, but maybe you had some feelings or thoughts about it.
Yeah. I do, but I don't really know the strongest place to start. But I do feel that there is a lot happening, Bob. And we sit here on a Sunday. I'm sure that there will be some calls for impeachment tomorrow. We'll see where that goes. And obviously last Wednesday was the big terrorism at the Capitol. And I guess I'm just feeling like the starkness, the contrast between what happened last week at the Capitol and what happened last summer at with all the BLM protests, and like the difference and the dramatic like imagery that I've been seeing about like how it's happened has been kind of eye-opening too, and it's like the hypocrisy is just so real and so strong that it's almost, in some ways I feel like, well, you can't ignore this systematic racism that's happening. You can't be like, yep, see, these two groups were treated the same by cops, by the president, by systems of power. Everything is just set up to destroy people of color in this country. And that's just like so apparent. And I feel like when you look at it from that lens, there's like a sense of like, hey, you can't ignore this anymore. And that feels good to me. And I think the other thing I want to talk about a little bit is the idea that when a lot of the imagery has been like of a little bit of like buffoonery or tomfoolery, meaning like, oh yeah, let's put the guy with like the Viking hat or the Davy Crockett hat on the cover, and he seems to be grabbing a lot of the attention. But there was a lot of people at this protest. It's a lot of different groups that came together to cause this act of terrorism. And I feel like it's important to note that there's a lot of people that were like very well trained that were going to do some pretty intense and fucked up shit,
Yeah. And only I'm hearing a little bit about that from the mainstream sources now, but you're right. The first focus was on the tomfoolery aspect, but that's just so misses the point. You're right. Yeah. Like, and they did, like, they killed a police officer with a fire extinguisher. That's ugly and brutal, right?
Yeah.
And where's your Blue Lives Matter now?
Yeah. Why aren't we seeing more of that?
Like if you see a Blue Lives Matter flag, that's just a flag of like, I'm racist. I hate black people. That's what that flag means to me.
Yeah. Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
I've been seeing the meme going around that, blue lives still don't exist. It just means that you don't like black people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to add to it, Bob?
One more thing was, I'm curious how, I don't really know how it ended. Like, why it went from, I remember following it. It was like, I thought it was going to be like a siege that lasted at least a few days. And what actually happened to bring it back? And like so much of the footage is just like, they're just ransacking everything, and there's like thousands of them. So do you know anything about like how it actually got quelled?
No, I don't. That's a great question. Yeah, I will say that I'm not like totally tuned into news sources, especially this week being a week back in the old office, working hard or hardly working. But yeah, I feel like I haven't had a whole lot of time to like put energy towards this.
Yeah.
So a lot of my information has come from you or from Instagram or from just other sources of like talking to people throughout the week. So I haven't really been tuned into the major news sources. I guess a little bit of the New York Times, but not a lot. What's your, I will say another thing that I've been seeing today has been the idea of why does impeachment matter? Like why, like, and I even said this, like, what's 1 week or 2 weeks really going to change that much? But I think that the thing that really struck me was the fact that, Donald Trump, if he does get impeached, he would end up missing out on his pension, which is $200,000 a year for the rest of his life. And also other things like being able to run for re-election, or I think there's one other thing that he would really lose out on, a piece of power that comes from ending a presidency in favorable terms.
Yeah. But, getting like CIA briefing or like intelligence briefings for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely brought up a lot of these emotions from last summer. And I would say that a lot of that feeling, it didn't go away, but like it definitely feels like it got suppressed a little bit over the last few months as we were mostly focused on the election.
Yeah.
And I feel like it feels like issues of race are back in the mainstream. I feel happy about that as well. Because I don't want that conversation to stop.
Yeah. And like I feel like moderates and liberals always like forget about how bad racism is. So they like are like, yeah, we probably did enough last summer, but things like this are like, nope, not even close. Like, so yeah, hopefully more progressive. This will ignite progressive movement again. This is like the pendulum that goes back and forth.
Definitely. I think it's going to radicalize in a way that a BLM protest might not have. Like it's going to take I feel like our country as a whole, like is just leans a little, like politically leans more towards the right, and people like, Joe Biden is like seen as like being a little left leaning, but I see him as like almost being right leaning with his political views,
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like maybe this is going to like open more eyes and provide a little more fire for those people that like were kind of waffling in the middle.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's maybe not. And I did come across another quote that I want to share that I really think is important, because I feel like this is kind of relates to what we're talking about, but it's from Ibram Kendi, and it says, the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it, and then dismantle it. And I feel like we as a country need to consistently identify that and consistently describe it, because when it does leave our mind frame, then it's harder to like put it as an importance in our day to day. I know that like we as a country and me as a person don't always do the best job of taking the next step, which is, and then dismantle it, but I do feel like when the more and more that we identify racist acts and racism happening in the US, then the more chances we'll have to dismantle it, you know?
Yeah. I would say to that, like, I think the issue is then, because we're talking about that quote after this action, it's like, it's obvious that this is racist, but what about all the subtle forms of racism that lead to this is the, I think, harder work.
Yeah. Can you describe that a little bit more? I agree, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when, like one of the messages coming out of the movements last summer is that the police need to be defunded. And, you know, when people like say that that's divisive or they don't pick up on that as politicians and make actions like work on that, like that's a form of racism.
Yeah, right.
Like the not working on these like so-called controversial efforts, you know, but that's what is at the root of, you know, a flare-up of this type of white supremacy, but like the structural white supremacy that's a lot more operating all the time in many different ways. That's like the harder part to name as racist. Like when someone says, I don't know, just like dismisses Black Lives Matter or yeah, I don't know, like as white people, like I feel like if we're not doing something every single day to like deepen our enmeshment in anti-racist struggles, then that's a form of racism because it will perpetuate all these things.
Yeah, I like that. I feel like that's a good message to have and a good mantra to hold in 2021.
Yeah. To be like, be fired up now, but like also be fired up 3 months from now when like people are talking about who knows what, you know, like they're talking about like, I don't know, some weird thing somewhere else, or maybe not even a weird thing, but something that's not like overtly around race.
Right. Whew. I do feel a little bit of hope from Georgia. That feels nice.
Yeah, that was a bit of a surprise that, yeah, a few weeks before that, it actually, yeah, I was surprised that both the Democrats won. I think it's a really positive thing.
Yeah, and you were also saying that, and I don't know if this is exact, or I might be misquoting you, but something about the senator from Alaska thinking about flipping as well.
Oh yeah, that Murkowski, who's a Republican, came out and said that, not exactly, but pretty close to saying like she would vote for like to uphold the impeachment. If the House impeaches, she would like indict or you know, like whatever the next step is that the Senate does, remove. Right. And yeah, they were also saying that like she might leave the Republican Party, which is something. Yeah, I don't know, like who knows? She's like fairly conservative anyway, so I'm not sure how much that would mean, but maybe it would mean a fair amount here and there, you know?
Yeah. I think it's important to think about those moments of crossing party lines because I don't know if it's happened at all since Obama's been elected or was elected, you know, 20 years ago. I feel like, and I don't really follow politics super closely, but I will say that it feels like that idea of crossing party lines hasn't happened in a long, long time. And it's an issue with politics right now.
Yeah, that's a good point that it hasn't had it happen. So if someone does it, maybe a few more people would do it. And yeah, it could be a little bit of a boost around certain issues for sure.
Yep.
There it is.
Thanks, Bob.
Yeah. Thanks for talking about that, Dave. Anything else happened that you really wanted to tell the listeners before we got into season 5 and talk about our theme?
I just think it's been a good week for me. I've been able to connect with a lot of people that I haven't talked to in a while. And I just wanted to relay the fact that I had a wonderful conversation with the Mysterioso Nick Cantrick. And it was really great to touch base with him. And not only that, but I got a mysterious, speaking of the mysterious, I got a mysterious package in the mail.
Oh, wow.
Just a really shoddy wrapped plastic bag. And inside the plastic bag was a jigsaw puzzle of a bunch of cats.
No way.
And it turns out it was from none other than Jen Grilly. So
yes.
I've been having a lot of fun connecting with those Vermonters out there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
She called it a cross-country prank of the highest order. And me and Julie are devising how to get back for that jigsaw puzzle prank.
That's a good one. I like good, clean pranks.
Oh, and one more thing. Yeah. Another Vermont connection participated in friend of the show, Katie Gillespie, hosted a Great British Zoom Bake Off.
Oh my.
Everyone that came was supposed to bake something that was related to their family and had meaning in the family. And there was 3 different categories of winners. One was the fan favorite, and one was the overall, or what is it called? The Star Baker.
Yeah.
And the final one was like, just like most heart-wrenching story or whatever. Best story, maybe. But it was a really good Zoom call, and I would highly recommend it to anyone that wants to host a Zoom off. It was just like it felt like sweet and interesting, and it was fun to watch what people baked and look at all their food that they had.
And did you also participate? Did you do some baking?
I did not. Julie did. So I was just so busy. I had a long day of school and lesson planning and just like so much going on this weekend. But Julie took up the mantle and baked some cookies, but neither of us really read the email, and we forgot that it was supposed to be related to the family. So our story was not as good as it could have been, but we still had lovely peanut butter cookies with Hershey Kisses in them.
Oh, nice. Did you win any awards?
No, but Julie, if there was an award for best British accent, it probably would have gone to Julie. Yeah, she did wonderful with that. But yeah, it was great. So I just wanted to throw all those shout outs out there and just say that it was a good week to connect with those Vermonters.
Beautiful. Yeah, the Vermont, it's interesting that you lived there for 5 years and just such a big part of who you are. So I imagine, it's probably something that you miss, and I bet you'd love to, travel back to Vermont and spend some time there.
Yeah, I was thinking it might happen this summer, but I just don't know. It probably not. There's a lot happening.
Yeah.
And we'll see. It depends. I guess I'll give even more updates. It looks like Colorado pushed teachers up into a bracket, so teachers are now in what's called 1B. So it's looking like we'll most likely get vaccinated in mid-February as teachers in Colorado. And I feel like there's a lot of hope there. I will say, from what I've heard, the vaccination is very much targeted towards COVID-19. And I don't think it has a lot of potential to fight off mutations. Meaning that as COVID starts to mutate, and I don't know how stable it is. Like, I know from what I've heard, like a disease like HIV/AIDS has a lot of mutations, and that's also like another reason that it's been extremely hard vaccine to create for HIV/AIDS because it mutates so rapidly. And I think COVID's more stable than that. From what I've heard, it's like a lot more stable than HIV/AIDS. But yeah, I don't know. So there's a sense of like, okay, like maybe we can get this under control. Maybe I'll be okay. But like, I'm wondering too for how long. Although I did hear that in at Emory College at the CDC, they're working on like the stage 2 of the vaccine, which would be able to fight off a lot more of the mutations. But who knows how far off that is?
Yeah, there's still so many question marks around vaccination.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't have a ton of information. A lot of this is coming from Malcolm Gladwell's podcast called Revisionist History.
And I didn't know that he talks about it. Does he have some new episodes out?
Yeah, he came out with some mid-December. So like right around Christmas, he came out with a 2-parter. It's not like a new season. He finished season 5 like October, I believe. But yeah, he came out with 2 new episodes, and it's mostly just like listener mailbag stuff, but he's reporting from Emory College in Atlanta, and it's good stuff. I recommend it, especially just to get a little more info on the vaccine. It was helpful for me.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a good tuned in, Dave.
Yeah, we're not even in that. That's not even this season, Bob.
No, you just like slapped out a tuned in and didn't even blink an eye.
Yeah, we're pros at this point, Bob.
Yep.
Wow, I guess I had a lot to update you on, didn't I?
Sure did.
Yeah, and it's okay because this is the first episode of our new season, and
yeah, it is.
We are not going to really get into any meat and potatoes this week, but we did want to kind of lay out the outline. Does that feel all right to you to get into, Bob?
Yeah. If I may use the metaphor, we want to set the table for the season.
Wow. Someone clip that out. We'll see you at the beginning of the show.
There it is, Dave. There's your soundbite.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, and it kind of feels like I'm avoiding getting that table set, Bob, but
perfect.
Oh, baby.
Well, Dave, you just set the table. You just set the table right there.
Got it set. So, do you want to walk us down the path, Bob, a little bit?
Yeah. Let me get the silverware out here real quick. So, season 5, Thriving in Dystopia, we thought about, we did our show last week thinking about the highs and lows of our show over last year. And season 3 was a real good one, really hit. I think that might have been when we were really hitting on our most gears. And we did isolation, basically, or like being separated. Separated was the theme. And so that's a hard theme. But we sort of did some thriving within it. So we thought, oh yeah, why don't we try for a hard theme like that again? And we just started talking about things and this, that, and the other. And the theme that sort of came out of that was the idea of avoidance and all the things that, you and I avoid, but likely a lot of people just avoid things that are hard and things that are scary or things that just really are off-putting. And so it seems like a pretty rich theme. And so that's where what we're thinking about. And maybe you can bring a little bit more detail to that, Dave, that I might have missed out.
Yeah. I feel like it doesn't really feel like a trait. Like it doesn't really feel like something that speaks to me, or like I feel strongly connected to, this idea of avoidance. But I also feel like it doesn't get talked about very much, which was kind of interesting to me. And we inevitably, like, we could do a show on like anger, but like, where would that get us? I feel like the books on anger are like deep and well varied and like not even worth really you and I talking about, but probably season 6 anyways. But I don't know. Avoidance feels like a kind of like mysterious in a lot of ways. And like, what do we avoid? What do we confront? I feel like for me, I'm also going to be thinking this season a lot about what we confront and what we avoid. Cause I feel like confrontation is kind of the opposite of avoidance. And a long, long time ago, you talked a little bit about, it might've been a New Year's resolution that you had in the mid-teens, Bob, where you talked about inviting confrontation and not shying away from the difficult. And I feel like that's something that I'm thinking about a little bit, but I don't really want to label that like confrontation as good or bad. I don't want to label avoidance as good or bad or like use those terms. But I think inevitably we're going to throughout these weeks. And I think that there's a lot of like importance in this idea of like playing it safe or like getting away from like the tasks. Or I think also avoidance can be related a little bit to isolation and being away from this world. And sometimes it goes back to this idea that we've talked about in our group of friends for a really long time is, should we live in a rural place where we can put the world away from us and we can like sustain ourselves off the land and sort of create like a utopia life? Or do we live in the rural or the suburban? Do we live in the city? Do we live in the place where we can affect change? Do we invite the world to us every day and make sure that like every step we take is a step towards creating a better world for everybody? And that's been a hard question, urban or rural. And I feel like we'll probably walk down that path a little bit as we go, but keeping a lot of that in mind of like the lives we live and what we decide to confront and what we decide to avoid and why. And yeah, I think it'd be okay too, Bob, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the sub themes that we're going to get into.
Yeah, that was good, Dave. Yeah, I appreciated all of that. Before I get into the sub themes, when you were talking about avoidance and confrontation, I was thinking about, let's dig into avoidance a bit here and think about like what is maybe like good and what is bad about avoidance. And two things come up for me. The first is like thinking about avoiding in a very like maybe elementary way or fundamental ways, like if there's like something like in a physical way, whereas if there's like just for the sake of an example, like traffic in one part of the city, but you have to get somewhere, you might avoid that part of the city in order to get where you want to go. And I'd say that's like maybe a positive use of avoidance, or like why people might avoid something to like not get bogged down. And so that I guess that's where it starts. But then I'm thinking of it further, and not like a physical avoidance, but more of like something in one's life, like a little bit more of a psychological avoidance of like, let's say I have to write an email to someone that it has like some stuff in it that's like I really feel like it has to be said, but it's hard to say it. Then I'll be like, hey, yeah, I'll write it tomorrow. I need to focus on my reading today. And then tomorrow comes and like I did a run and got a phone call from someone and I didn't write it again. And it's like when does like putting it off become avoiding it, you know? And then I think that is like, I do at some point really want to get into that moment of like, oh, I'm not just like not doing it because it's second on my to-do list. I'm like actually actively pushing it down my to-do list, and like that is avoidance. So I'm interested in talking about that at some point. Yeah. And before I go into the subtopics for this season, do you have any like thoughts on just this like broader topic of the good and the bad of avoidance?
Yeah, I feel like sometimes it's necessary to avoid. Sometimes it's necessary to put off. And sometimes there's a lot of healing that can be done with not pushing to be or not confronting immediately. And I feel like some people maybe will like snap to needing to like find resolution, right? And they'll be like, we need to confront this. We need to like dig deep into this. And I feel like sometimes with my emotions, like I feel like I want to find resolution really fast because like feeling mired in grossness or like pain or sadness or anger or depression and like having that be like sitting with that is really hard. And I want to like work through it. But I feel like sometimes it's like, sometimes we need to avoid like finding that resolution in like a personal relationship because I feel, or a conflict, because sitting with pain can sometimes bring a lot of perspective, and sitting with pain can bring a new outlook. And yeah, I'm not very good at that. I am really good at avoiding conflict. I'm good at avoiding like hard conversations, and that doesn't feel good. And that's something that I feel like a lot of, what's the word? A lot of like guilt almost about.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, rounding full circle, I feel like I haven't ever really put myself in a political conversation with someone that is coming from a totally different spot than me and really, really confronted that. I've more often than not, I've avoided that because it's really scary. And there's a lot of people out there that do it on the daily. And I have a lot of, I guess a lot of like pride and love for the people that are like, yeah, I mean, and I guess to a lot of these people are just like pushing their own ideals towards other people. And that's not what I want to say, but like the people that are out there really listening, I really love that perspective. And yeah, so I guess really what I'm trying to talk in a roundabout way all about is that, yeah, there is no qualifier here on this show. And there's nothing that I really want to say like this is good, this is bad, because I think a lot of it is like human nature, and a lot of it is like protecting ourselves for a battle later, or, you know, getting into the thick of it because that's what we need. And I just want to kind of like dig deep into this a little bit and find out some epiphanies, because I feel like that's one of my favorite things that's happened on this show, is having those moments of like, oh, that's what I've been doing. And I want to like take some realization to that. I feel like that will happen with these topics.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think they're just like really, really important. And when we think about it, we can I think for me, I think there's a difference between sitting with pain, for example, or giving something its space versus avoidance. I think avoidance, at least of this psychological avoidance of not dealing with a psychological stressor. I think that, is different, but it's a fine line. And I'm interested in drawing out the nuances of that when something that might be adaptive or healthy turns into something that's less healthy or maladaptive. So maybe I'll just mention that is one topic that we'll get into, avoidance versus confrontation. Another topic is particularly tough conversations that you mentioned, maybe tough political conversations. And I want to bring up the idea of principled struggle in that show. We want to get into procrastination as a form of avoidance and looking at that. We might do a 2-parter on disgusting things. That which is disgusting or gross gets avoided, and curious to get our hands dirty in that one. Another one is in-group, out-group, avoiding the out-group. So thinking about social power and social structures with avoidance. Earlier we might talk about playing it safe, avoiding dangerous things. I have 2 more here. One is coming back to things that were avoided, maybe days, weeks, months, or years have passed. Can you go back to something that was previously avoided? And then the last one, Dave, is avoid the Noid.
Oh, man. We'll have to see what happens with that. But I'm glad that made the list, Bob.
Yeah. For folks who are wondering what the heck that is, the Noid is a character of Domino's Pizza of the early 90s, maybe late 80s. And you wanted to avoid that Noid. You didn't want that Noid to get you.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to walking down this path with you, Bob.
Yep. Me too, Dave. I think it'll be great and important, but maybe hard.
Yeah. And I think that's a good spot.
Yeah, I think so too, Dave. And then we have a season 5 dessert. And I think you have the better idea of the dessert. So please, Dave.
Sure. Let's get a little song for you. Butterfly effect in the sky. A clockwork orange in the ground. Philip K. Dick. H.G. Wells. It's a dystopian rainbow.
Ooh, that was good.
Oh, yeah. I should have mentioned 1984 in there somewhere. Well, Bob, I feel like sometimes I miss talking about dystopia. I know basically everything we talk about happens in this dystopia of the world we live in, but I do feel like some of the roots of this show are comparing our world to the dystopian world, or at least just talking about some dystopia each week. And one of the things I wanted to do was take a peek at a dystopia each week. And this week, the dystopia that I wanted to bring to the table is a book by Lois Lowry called The Giver.
Ooh.
And I don't really know what I'm going to do with this, but I will just give a quick analysis. It takes place, and this is all from memory, so forgive me if I miss it, but it takes place in a world where there's no longer color, and there's also no longer memories, or not memories, but a cultural memory. And what happens, what's happened is there's this person called the giver who holds all those memories. And as each generation passes, the new giver is selected from the job list. As classic dystopian fiction, you get up in front of your whole community and you are assigned a job by that community. And the main protagonist is a young kid who has been tasked with becoming the next giver. And so his job is to hold all the memories. And he starts to see these ideas of color and like what ice cream tastes like. And I remember part of the reason I was thinking about this book is like, I was wondering if it still holds up. I was wondering if this is a book that would have meaning for the kids that I teach. And I do know that like Lois Lowry she's a great author, of course, but I kind of feel like The Giver might not quite have the radical edge or the grit that for the generation of kids living now. And one of my thoughts was that it feels like it's just like a happy little ending. And I feel like, I'm spoiling it a little bit, but if you haven't read The Giver, it's too late for you. I feel like it ends with the main character like escaping on a sled. That's my memory of it. And that might be wrong, but I just feel like there's nothing at stake, and it feels really whitewashed, this book, to me. And I don't know. I'm just curious to hear some of your thoughts too, Bob. Like, do you have any ideas of what The Giver meant to you as a kid, or like, do you think it would still hold up?
I don't know. So I read that book, I think in 7th grade, and I enjoyed your summary of it right here. My issue is like, I just don't remember it well enough. It like has like vague, so I couldn't really say if it like had critical edge, or like, all I can say is I remember liking it. Like I read it and I was like, oh, that's a cool book. And I remember like it didn't really stick with me, like I don't really remember the main point. So yeah, I'm just like grasping at straws here to mention something, because I know I read that book, but I think that's a cool thought, or like an interesting thought, that like, does it stand up? Like, some things are really well written for that moment, but don't stand up. And I'm curious about that too. So I like that you bring up that question.
Yeah. Well, as always, we'll just keep it short at the end here, because just a little tidbit, but I'm sure most everyone who's listening has read The Giver and probably has some thoughts popping up for them.
Yeah. And I hope someone's read it and it's just like, that is dead wrong. Like, The Giver is a classic. It will always be a classic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But here's the thing. I don't even know when it was written. I want to say like the 80s, right?
It says, I'm looking at it here, 1993.
Whew. George Orwell wrote 1984 in 1948. And I feel, and I might get my year wrong a little bit there, but like, can you imagine a book holding up for a century? Can you imagine anything that you wrote right now to hold up for a century? And
yeah,
even if The Giver does hold up, which it probably holds up okay, but I'm sure there's some like kind of moments of like, that's not that great. But like, I am just blown away by like what promotes longevity, and or like, yeah, why do we keep coming back to some things but like leave other things in the dust? Anyhow,
yeah, I like that question. That can be something that guides us in the old dystopian rainbow part of the show.
Yeah. Do you think anyone will listen to this podcast in 20 years?
No,
certainly not. Right? What if what we're saying here is like really just like becomes prophetic and, eternalized, and people make a religion based on thriving in dystopia?
Oh, Davey boy. Sometimes you got it. Sometimes you really got it.
All right. Well, that's the old dystopian rainbow. Love it.
Nice starter, Dave. Appreciate that. Well, maybe I'll give folks the coordinates and then we'll pack it up. So you can email us at davepeachtree, all one word, at gmail.com. Find us at Instagram, thriving_in_dystopia. Twitter is at bmaze19. And then we have our website, thrivingindystopia.com.
Love it. All right, Bob. Thanks for the great starter. See you next week.
Fun to get it going again, Dave. Have a great week, buddy.
Yeah. Love you, Bob.
Love you, Dave.
What's up, Thriving Crew? Bob and Dave want to take a second to thank you for lending them your ears. They also want to thank the artists for making everything a little more beautiful. The intro song is In Heaven by Drake Stafford. Our audio is edited by the consummate and dexterous Nadir Chayech. Web design by Chris the Mixer Sawyer. And of course, visual art is by the prolific and enigmatic Joe Shine. And finally, our new outro song is Bashful by Ketsa. See you next week.